worship is changing in our churches, and that means music is changing, and that leads to a shortage of qualified organists. That's our topic today, the organist shortage on Austin Faith Dialogue. Stay with us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today for Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking about the organist shortage and what that means for worship these days in Christian churches. We have two guests, Jean Fuller, who's from St. David's Episcopal Church, and John Stuber, who's from St. Louis Catholic Church. Good to have both of you.
Thank you.
Now, our thesis is that there's a shortage of qualified organists. So maybe we ought to define the term first. Just what is a qualified organist?
Well, a qualified organist would probably be someone that has had some sort of formal training, whether it be university or studying with a private instructor for a certain amount of time. There are certain qualifications or certificates that people can obtain besides university degrees. There's the National Pastoral Musicians for Catholic churches, and I'm sure there's other things for Episcopal that would allow one to be certified as a service player, and then also the American Guild of Organists has several sort of degree plans that you can get to be certified. But
so now, Jean, does that mean that one cannot play the organ if one is not certified, qualified, has this education?
No, I have a student who hasn't been to college, and she hasn't taken any of the tests that we offer through AGO, and she plays at one of our churches in Round Rock. So where there's a will, there's a way.
What is it about the organ that seems to have led to a shortage of people qualified to play it? Because many of our churches do have the instrument, but why are the people not there?
I guess I'll say something about that. It's probably a shift in cultural emphasis on the new kind of music, contemporary music. There are a lot of churches that are starting in storefronts, and they're in one room, and they frankly can't afford to buy an organ. And there are other churches that decide they want to stay with contemporary worship, so therefore they don't want an organ. They want to use the instruments, and they want to use music that's maybe superimposed on the wall, so we don't have to look down in our laps. We look up and we sing. And they use the piano a lot too. So it's kind of a supply and demand, different kinds of music. I would say it does cost a lot to maintain a pipe organ, and electronic organs and keyboards are a lot cheaper.
I wonder, John, since you both are full-time professional organists, how that feels to you to be part of perhaps a dying breed, one of just a chosen few here.
Kind of like a dinosaur, I guess,
Yeah.
or maybe something that kind of like the stained glass workers, they've lost that art. It's kind of frightening when you think about it, that hopefully this art won't be lost in the next century or so, that because there's such a shortage of people going into this field. So, eventually if we don't continue to encourage people to do organ, then we will have no more players.
So what is it then about the field that keeps you in it? I would gather from the conversation then that it's perhaps not well paid, sometimes not thought of as a full-time professional position. So why this kind of ministry for you?
Well, I can speak for myself. I know that it's a calling for me. I can remember when I was about 7 years old at the church I was being raised at in Longview, Texas. They had a very large 4-manual Aeolian Skinner organ, which was like the Cadillac of the organs. And I can remember as a 7-year-old going up to the organ and seeing this small, petite little lady playing these humongous sounds on this instrument. And I was smitten. I was just really bitten by these awesome sounds that this little lady, who was about as big as I was as a 7-year-old, could make this awesome music. And it struck a chord within me. And it was something that I knew that I wanted to do. I can't think of no other word than to say it was a calling, and I had to answer it. I had to do it.
Right, and you've been at St. Louis how long now?
I've just finished my second year. I was previously at St. Thomas More Catholic Church for 7 years. So
How
St. Louis
fun
for
to
2.
live out your calling.
Mm-hmm.
What has your experience been then, Jean?
Well, I grew up in the Baptist church, and as you know, Baptist churches really like to sing and do lots of music. So I, like John, started out at the First Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I too watched the little lady down at the organ, a big 4-manual Aoline Skinner, make these most wonderful sounds. And I was very young when that happened, and so I just continued on. So when we moved around in Oklahoma, and I learned how to play the hymns, then eventually I got asked to play, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And then when I got to college, then I thought, I think I want to take organ lessons. And I started out as a business major, and then I decided, well, if I'm going to spend all this time and money, I'm going to be a music major and an organ major. So that's what I've always been.
And since both of you studied organ, what does the curriculum include? Certainly not just being at the keyboard. What else does one learn?
Well, in an undergraduate degree, you would get a Bachelor of Music or a Bachelor of Music in Education, and your major instrument would be organ. And in a lot of schools, you would be required to play juries, which is where the faculty grade you on certain pieces. And then probably in your sophomore, junior, and senior year, you would give recitals and be graded on them.
And do you have to know something also about teaching, about the history of music? How broad is an organ education?
There's a lot of courses that you'll take that are specifically on the history of music, starting with medieval, Renaissance, all the way through contemporary. And then there are what are called pedagogy classes, which teach you how to teach. And then also specifically to organ, there are organ literature courses. The organ literature spans many centuries of music. It's one of the biggest repertoires for any instrument that there is, so there's quite a bit to study there. There's the organ history. And also a lot of universities offer courses on organ maintenance, so that if you're hired by a church, not only do you have to play, but you have to maintain that instrument. It may be too difficult to get a service technician to come down and fix a stuck note that happens on Saturday night. So you being the organist, you have to take care of that on Sunday morning.
We do this together.
Quite a bit.
I imagine you do. Now, I'm intrigued with the notion that the organ is really that ancient of an instrument. I, as a layperson, am probably no different from many people in thinking organ music came about perhaps during the Renaissance or so, but evidently that's not the case. So what can you tell us about the history of this instrument?
Well, it's in the Bible, in the Psalms. Praise the Lord, with the organ, timbrel, brass. Goes all the way back to Jerusalem. The original organs were pumped by water, and then when they did away with that, people would stand on them and pump the bellows and push the air through the pipes, and then they just evolved. And we have many different kinds now. We have trackers and electric pneumatics, and we have a lot of those here in Austin.
Okay, go back a little bit. Not everyone is going to know that terminology.
Right. Well, we have my organ at St. David's is electric pneumatic, and parts of this organ are 100 years old. And what it does is a pipe. You press the key with your finger, and through a series of magnets and vacuums, the hole that goes to the pipe, the valve is open and the air goes through the pipe. But there's a lot of electronic stuff going on, magnets, wind, that kind of stuff. At UT, the big organ at UT is a tracker organ. And when you press a note down, it connects to a tracker, and the tracker opens the pipe and lets the air in.
So it's a mechanical connection, you mean?
Actual
It's a mechanical organ, whereas a lot of organs still across the United States are electric pneumatic and require lots of attention because they've got lots of little wires and things that go wrong.
Now, if the instrument is that old, then John, say something a little bit about the organ repertoire over the centuries. Surely what we play on the organ now is not necessarily representative of what people played centuries ago.
The first extant music that we have specifically for organ, I believe, dates about the 1400s. And so we've got music from then on. That was when music actually became standardized notation-wise. And then throughout the Renaissance and the Baroque, they just continued to write for the organ. The organ fascinated a lot of people. So a lot of the major composers would write for organ. We don't have much in the classical era. Mozart didn't write much for organ. He wrote for mechanical organ, but later on the organ came back into a more prominent position, and composers wrote for it more. And they're still writing for it today. So there's quite a bit of literature.
So the contemporary literature then, what is it like? Does it still tend to be the traditional 4-part harmony that we would find in our hymnals, or what are people writing?
Well, we have that, and then we have a lot of really atonal organ music. There's a composer in San Antonio who writes chorale preludes or pieces based on a hymn melody, but it's very contemporary, and it does, the way he writes, it shows off the organ more, but it's in a new way. It's kind of atonal, it's kind of hard to listen to, but in the right setting with the right organ, right acoustical setting, it's different. And, you know, some of these are real hard to play, some of these newer pieces.
Well, then I'm curious, if the organ is still being built and still being played, if music is still being written, I wonder then if the only reason for the organist shortage is simply the cost of the instrument? Would that be a fair statement?
That's one
Could be,
of the
yeah.
reasons, but yet it is a fair statement. And it's one of the most complex musical instruments that there is. I think besides the harp, it has one of the most moving mechanical parts to it. So yeah, it is very expensive. It's very expensive to maintain. But if they're built well and built with the good
They'll last
materials,
forever.
they'll last. I mean, there are organs in Europe that are over 300 years old that are still working, you know, with just minor maintenance to them, but they still continue to work today.
And an organ, though, is an instrument that is built into a space and is not as portable as other musical
there
instruments.
are portable pipe organs.
But generally in churches, yeah, it is
It's usually
part
built in
of the
with the
furniture
scheme.
or part of the architectural
So
design
perhaps
of the building.
another area of growth for organ music would be developing an instrument that has the glorious sound, but is more portable. Do you suppose?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. What I was referring to is we call it a portative, and it's a little organ with one rank of pipes, and we use it to accompany choirs or play continuo parts on when we play at the orchestras. That's a little portable organ. There's also freestanding organs, like at the Episcopal Seminary. That organ is freestanding; it rolls around, but it's not going to roll out of that room. It just sits there.
Right.
It's not built in.
Okay.
A lot of times, too, the organ is actually a part of the building. Like a violin has the wood that makes it resonate. The organ uses the building to sound, and each organ is voiced or scaled or made to speak for that particular room.
Right.
So that would be difficult to take that organ to a different space where the acoustics are different, where there's more reverberation in one room, where it's drier in another, where there's more echo in another. So each organ is tailored for that particular
Got
room.
it. Okay, so in part the technology. There's a lot more to ask about organists and organ music and the organ shortage. We'll be right back. Stay with us for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We're glad you stayed here for Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking about the organist shortage and having a lively discussion with Gene Fuller from St. David's Episcopal Church and John Stuber from St. Louis Catholic Church. Good to have both of you.
Thank you.
Now, in the first half, we talked a little bit about your stories. get the feeling there's more to each of your stories as to how you got where you are. So, Jean, that looks like it rings a chord for you. You want to start?
Well, like I said before, I started playing the piano in church when I was 12, and I subbed for the organist, and then got into college, and I wanted to be a concert organist, Well, when I got out and got married and, kind of needed a job, so I got a secretary job, and didn't do it for a while, but I was always pulled into it. And going to church, and it's like, oh, I've got to get back to this. So I went back to school and decided that I didn't want to be a public school teacher. And so I went back into the performance side of it. And that's what I've been doing for about the past 20 years here in Austin. In fact, I've been here 25 years. And I've evolved as Austin has evolved. We were just talking about that. My job at St. David's is an interesting job, and I'm very fortunate to have this job because we're probably the only two people in town that have real organ jobs that are full-time. I mean, there's enough playing for us to do that we can work full-time, and it does consume that much time. One of the things that we do at St. David's is we have lots of weddings and lots of funerals, and as I was saying earlier, we're there when they're born, when they're baptized, and we're there when they get married, and we're there when they die. And that's a really neat thing that we get to be a part of all of these families' lives as they go through these different lives events. We watch children grow up, and you make friends with these congregations. I've only been at St. David's almost 10 years, but I was at Central Christian for 11, and I still have close contact with that congregation. And that's the same way John has. We also studied with Dr. Speller at UT, so we go way back too as students too. So we have a lot of friends in the field.
You sound like a silent presence in a lot of the life of the church. What might a typical week look like for you?
Well, it starts out, I take Mondays off because I've been up there all weekend. So Tuesday morning we have a 3-hour staff meeting, get caught up. Then I practice. And then I have 5 students, and throughout the week I teach them an hour time, so that's 5 hours. And then I go back and practice some more. And then Wednesday rolls around, and we all take turns doing morning prayer. So that's another duty, although we like doing it. Another student comes, I practice some more, get ready for choir rehearsal on Wednesday night. Thursday comes, more practice, working with David Stevens. He's our director of music, and that's a lot of fun. Got to have fun when you're doing this. Fridays and Saturdays are weddings. Lots of weddings. This weekend there's 2 weddings, so I'll be up there Friday night and most of Saturday. Right. Sunday mornings we have 6 services up there, and 2 of them are with music, but I go at 7 to practice, play for 2 services and a rehearsal, and then I'm done by 1. John has a little bit different schedule in Catholic Church.
Since St. Louis is affiliated with a school, a couple of times a week we'll have a mass for the school kids. So I'm there at 7:30, and then by 8 o'clock the little choir is rehearsed, and we do our mass from 8 to 9. Then if there's any office work, or if I need to get in touch with any brides that are getting married on the weekend, or if we've had a funeral in the parish during that week, I will meet with that family and discuss music for that. And then a lot of the time is spent in practice. A lot of people don't realize that we don't just show up on Sunday and play. I mean, there's a lot of preparation time that comes into this, and it's a skill, just like a sport, that you have to practice for this sport. You have to practice for this skill. You have to keep your fingers limbered and your feet moving correctly. And watching an organist, you can see that it's a great balancing act. So a lot of my time during the day is spent in practice. I also teach. I have several piano students and also some organ students that I teach throughout the day or throughout the week. And then weekends are full of wedding rehearsals, and then masses to play for on Saturday and Sunday in the Catholic Church, and then the week starts over. So a lot of the time is spent in practice, more so in practice or preparation for a rehearsal or a mass than actually showing up and playing. And another point is that it's supposed to look like it's effortless. So it takes a lot of work to make this look like it's effortless, that I actually just show up on Sunday and play these things that look very easy. So.
Many church professionals would say that, a lot of practice behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Since you are, both of you, at your churches so much and so much a part of the life of the church, I would think you might have some funny stories, some embarrassing moments, some whatever in your life as
I have one that
organist.
happened just last weekend at St. Louis. we're doing some repairs on the organ, and we've gotten some new stops that were installed, some new musical sounds that were installed, and some of these sounds take more blowers, which create more wind. And we had a blower hooked up that was a little less than adequate. It was rather old. So during the middle of the Mass, the blower caught fire. So the organ pushes a lot of wind out, and so there was a strange smell inside the church last Sunday. But in addition to the blower motor blowing up, we had also blown a gasket on one of the air handlers in the air conditioner. So right after the sermon or the homily, I got up and I went to the back of went upstairs to where the organ loft is, and kind of peered my head around and saw that the room was full of smoke. So I came back down, called 911, and then proceeded out to the altar to tell the deacon and the priest that we needed to evacuate the building immediately because there was threat of fire. So, all the fire trucks showed up, all the news trucks showed up, and it could have been a panic, but thank goodness everything was under control and it wasn't that serious. So that's probably one of my most recent, but I do have a funnier wedding story. I had done this wedding a couple of years ago with the priest that is there at St. Louis now, Father Larry Covington. It was a wedding, and it was a Christmas wedding, and the bride came down the aisle with Christmas lights in her hair, with a battery pack on back of her so that the lights were twinkling at her wedding. And in addition to that, she brought the little ring bearer and flower girls down in a little red flyer wagon. So
you were trying to keep a straight face and your fingers on the appropriate keys.
Yeah, that was difficult.
Obviously, there's much more that one can see from the
sure.
organ bench in a
sure.
service than most of us realize.
Sure.
And what's happened to you, Jean?
Well, if I ever write the book, it's going to be things I've heard and seen while on the bench. Mine is a wedding story. I play all around town at other churches. We all do that. And I was at a Catholic church, and I'd got there to practice with a soloist who was large and had rhinestone glasses that were circular. And so I got ready to play, and I'd left my music on the pew, and when I got ready to play, I couldn't find it. And I thought, oh no, I can't find any of my music. Somebody had sat down, and I didn't know where it was, so I had to play almost everything from memory. Anyway, it came time for the Unity Candle, and the soloist gets up to sing Ave Maria. I hope she's not listening. And the bride goes up, and they light their candle, and she puts her candle back, and these are spring-loaded candle things. She puts it back, and it proceeds to go out into the audience.
Lit.
And all this time, I'm like dying behind the organ and just dying of laughter, and the soloist is trying to sing Ave Maria, and I'm down there playing like this, going so no one would see me laughing. Then the next weekend, I saw her at a medieval Renaissance dinner at UT, and I saw her there, and she said, everybody in the whole church knows about what happened at that wedding. I've got tons more of these stories, but that one just always stuck with me.
That's a classic. I think many of us who are in local churches will be much more careful around our organists now.
We see all.
Knowing that if something is happening off to the side, you all are still there. You're still right in the front. Now, how can someone not want to be an organist?
Well,
with such a ringside seat.
We do have a lot of fun. I mean, we've always had a lot of fun doing this. And I mean, we've had down times where we were, we didn't make very much money, or we couldn't play a piece, or we didn't get along with our directors of music. But we've evolved because, we love this, and we wouldn't be doing, or I wouldn't be doing anything else. And I've done other things, and I always come back to this. So.
And that is the bottom line.
Yeah.
We are doing what we love to do. And how many people can say that I really love my work and I get paid for it?
Exactly. Well, let me ask each of you then, how would you go about encouraging others to take up this kind of ministry in their local churches or wherever they happen to have opportunity to play?
I think just being visible, and I know for me myself, a lot of times at the end of Mass, little kids will come up and they'll sit with me on the organ bench and just watch. And I always give them a time to ask questions, or if they want to talk about the organ, or even if they want to play the organ, I'll let them play. So I think visibility is important, and encouraging young people to go into this, and that, yes, it's fun, yes, it's hard work, yes, it's lonely to do this because you practice so much by yourself, but it's very rewarding, and you know, it's a lot of fun, and you can make a living at it. You've got to be creative, but you can do it.
One of the things that John and I have done, I kind of started it when my children were in elementary school, and we developed a cultural affairs monthly concert program. And when the kids got to be in 5th grade, then we would bring all the kids out from the elementary school to the new organ at UT, and John and I would demonstrate it and talk to them. And a lot of these kids had never been into a concert hall. It gave us opportunity to talk about the organ, and we had pipes so they could see how it worked. And then, of course, the neat thing was playing the organ.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, that's a lot of their first experience with a pipe organ, with a real organ.
And I know at St. David's we have a Mother's Day Out program, and a lot of times the parents will bring their kids. They're leaving the church, and the children will say, "Well, what is that sound?" And so they bring them up, and I always let them come up and sit at the organ, and they're just in awe of it.
So some of it is just demystifying the instrument and its sound.
Come up and see me after church. I'll let you play.
Making it user-friendly, you know.
It dawns on me to wonder then if it also has to do with pastors or whoever is leading the worship.
It's a very important part.
Giving a different emphasis, say, to the prelude, the postlude, or whatever is in the service, so that people pay attention differently to organ music?
Right.
How might pastors do that? Just sit down at the end of the service, or what?
Well, at St. David's, they always hang around and clap afterwards. Just, I don't know, they just do. And I know at St. David's, people are inclined to come in and sit down and pray, so they're pretty quiet anyway. And, you know, so that starts with the church and the rector or the minister. How do you want to set this up?
Okay.
I know a lot of times at St. Louis, Father Larry has said before the last piece or the postlude, he'll say, now John is playing something that's very difficult today, so you might stick around a little bit and listen to it, you know, to give yourself a little bit of culture. So any encouragement that they can give to say, look at this, see what's happening, you know, come up, ask questions, just listen.
So
That's
that
worth
organ
it.
music isn't just background music
Right.
while something else is going on, right?
Right.
We've got a few seconds each. What would you want your legacy to be as an organist?
I think I would like for people to remember me as I was a really good service player.
Okay.
I like playing concerts a lot, but just to help the people move through the service, in and out of the liturgy, the music is like the glue that holds all of this together, and that when they look back and say, I remember when Jean played, we could all sing, and that's what I want to leave.
A good legacy.
I think that would be mine too, that through my playing I could encourage these people to sing and to raise their voices to the praise of God.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Jean and John. It's been good
Thank
to
you.
have you here. And thank you for joining us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you next week right here.